ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिन् इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So we see here in Sankhya philosophy as enunciated by Lord Kapila, very systematic explanation about some of the fundamental subtle principles which grossly we cannot see are described. Generally we find the material science is based on gross matter, manipulation of gross matter, manipulation of gross understanding. Just like they may study about atoms, they may study about material nature. So it is more or less gross. Just like even the atomic bomb, what they have discovered is nothing but gross. So practically, subtle understanding, subtle science is not known today. Just like we find Brahmastra is not produced. It is also like something like atom bomb. A lot of differences are there. And it is not produced from gross matter. It is produced from mind, by chanting mantra. So, this subtle science is not known. Whereas we find that in Bhagavatam, all these are described very systematically, very nicely. That is why Srimad Bhagavatam, about Srimad Bhagavatam it is said, Vidya Bhagavata Vadihi. If you want to come to the end of knowledge, then if one studies Srimad Bhagavatam, then he has reached the end of knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam is also described as natural commentary on Vedanta, the end of knowledge. That's why practically you will find after every chapter it is said Bhashya Brahma Sutrana. Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra. So that is why it is recommended Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. One should daily read or understand Srimad Bhagavatam. It is such an important literature. And it is said in Bhagavatam itself, after the disappearance of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavatam, like a sun, it arose in order to give direction to misguided people of Kali Yuga. So, this is the importance of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is said in the Vedic literature, Bhagavatam has to be studied right from the beginning. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, our sambandha with Krishna is explained. Without knowing sambandha, without acting on that platform of sambandha, Where is prayojana? Just like even in the material world, suppose you want to get a child, prayojana, that is your, goal. Then, first of all, there is a sambandha between men and woman, husband and wife. Once they are married, then there is a relationship of husband and wife. There is contact, and when one acts on that platform of husband and wife, then one may get a child. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam, if we want the fruit of Srimad Bhagavatam, then this sambandha has to be understood. This is also very important. One should not neglect this. What is this material world? What is its relationship with the Supreme Lord? What is the living entity? What is its relationship with the Supreme Lord? All those things are described very systematically in Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why one should not think this to be some material subject matter. This is not material subject matter. Directly we try to go and try to understand about Krishna, we will fail. We will think it to be some ordinary relationship. Because until and unless we understand who are the gopis, what are their relationship with the Supreme Lord, we will think they are also like man and woman of this material world, and Krishna is having this kind of relationship. So that is why, what is matter, what is spirit, what is their relationship with the Supreme Lord, all those things have to be understood very systematically. And Sankhya philosophy of Kapila Dev very, very systematically, very, very beautifully describes about all those subject matters, about sambandha, what this material nature is, how it is related to the Supreme Lord, what is the living entity, how this living entity comes into this material existence, how it becomes entangled, how by focusing, meditating on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, the living entity once again, it can revive its original consciousness. It can come out of this material entanglement and go back to Godhead. All that subject matter is very nicely described. So here we can see Prabhupada starts by explaining from the previous verses that earlier it was already described that egoism in the mode of goodness, when egoism is influenced by mode of goodness, the result is mind. Mind is produced, and mind's characteristic is acceptance and rejection. One of the most important characteristic of the mind is to accept desires which are favorable to us, reject desires which are unfavorable. So that means mind is producing desires and accepting and rejecting favorable and unfavorable desires. In fact, why mind is considered to be the principal, most important factor in yoga system is because of this. So much, impetus and so much of, that the central point is not given, so much focus is not given on intelligence and senses like that, but on the mind. The whole yoga system is meant for controlling the mind. Because if the mind is controlled, senses and all automatically they will come under subjugation. And if we understand this principle, that mind works by acceptance and rejection of desires. So fundamental principle of mind is desires. So then it becomes very easy. So what do the yogic process, what do? They try to subdue their desires, material desires, gradually pull out all their senses from getting engaged in matter when the mind is running out through the senses on material object, it tries to withdraw the senses and gradually subdue the material desires. And then slowly start focusing on spiritual desire by meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. Whereas spiritual process of Krishna consciousness is different. Right from the beginning it is advised, you just put your mind on lotus feet of Krishna. Savai manaha Krishna padar vindyor. First of all, mind should be engaged on the lotus feet of the Lord. So we'll find Prabhupada explains that very beautifully, very nicely. So this is as far as the mind is concerned. Now what has happened at the present moment, desires have become contaminated. Our original desires were to serve the Lord, He is the master. Now they have become contaminated. We want to serve ourselves, not the master. So this contamination of the desires can be done by purifying our desires. And how that has to be done? The secret is given, Prabhupada is saying, by understanding that the Lord of the mind is Aniruddha. He is the Lord of the mind. Mind is central, mind is very important. So if you understand the Lord of the mind is Aniruddha, what should you do? Just surrender unto Lord Aniruddha, the master of senses, the master of mind. Then what will happen? Desires will become purified. And that is the central focus of Bhakti Yoga. Savai manaha Krishna padar vindayor. Just focus your mind on the lotus feet of the Lord. See how Prabhupada describes scientifically. Mind, how it will be purified? Because mind means desires. How desires will be purified? Now the Lord of the mind, controller of the mind is the Supreme Lord, Aniruddha. So if we just surrender unto Aniruddha, if we just focus on Aniruddha, then it will become purified. The example is given. If there is fire, and if you are in touch with fire, you also will act like fire. Isn't it? So similarly, if we want to become Krishnaized, then you just have to be in contact with Krishna. And how the mind can be in contact with Krishna? By meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna. And in Kali Yuga, the best process of meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord is by chanting the holy name. Now, we should not be thinking, Savai manaha Krishna padar vindar, so from tomorrow I will sit like this and I will meditate on the lotus feet of Krishna. In Kali Yuga, the best way to meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord is by chanting the holy name. Because the Lord is non-different. What does it mean to associate with the Lord? Either by meditating on the lotus feet, what are we doing? We are associating with the Lord. Similarly, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, actually we are associating with the Lord. And if we are in association with the Lord, desires will become purified. See, so that is the process of Bhakti Yoga, best process. So, mind is considered to be very important factor. That is what Prabhupada is trying to say in today's purport. So, then next comes, Prabhupada explains intelligence. So, here it is said, just in the previous verse it was explained, intelligence is the product of egoism, in passion, in Rajoguna. And we saw different characteristic of intelligence is there, discrimination, all those things we saw. Today, it is explained here, the senses are also product of Rajoguna, egoism in Rajoguna. And there are two kinds of senses. 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses. What are working senses? गोपीनाथ, वर्किंग सेंसेस कौन सा है हमारा? हाथ है ना, हैंड, वर्किंग सेंसेस, लेग्स, देन माउथ, नहीं वो नॉलेज एक्वायरिंग है। देन हैं genitals, then anus. Okay, they are working senses. Knowledge acquiring, eyes, ears, tongue, skin, right? All this is knowledge acquiring. So here, how beautifully it is explained. All these senses, specifically working senses, they depend on prana. If prana is there, if vital energy is there, they will act. Hands are acting. Suppose if there is no prana, hand will not act. Even knowledge acquiring senses also primarily depend on prana. Without prana, there is no question of any senses acting. But they depend after prana, the knowledge acquiring senses depends on buddhi, on intelligence. Based on the intelligence, we receive knowledge through these different knowledge acquiring senses. So that is what it is said here. If you read this verse, it says here, Pranasya hi kriya shaktir. This kriya shakti, working senses, they are dependent on prana. Buddhir vignana shaktita. Whereas knowledge acquiring senses, to acquire knowledge, one depends on intelligence. So that is being described, and Prabhupada is explaining this further very interestingly, very beautifully. Prabhupada explains. So from this, what do we understand? Prabhupada concludes, prana is also product of mode of passion. Prana is a product of mode of passion. Thus, that is how we find, if one wants to improve very quickly in material acquisition, material advancement of civilization, that can happen by mode of passion. And that's how we find this whole creation also takes place on the principle of passion. Brahma also creates by Rajoguna, because that is the secret. Simple secret. If you want gorgeous material civilization, because it's all based on prana, and that prana is coming from mode of passion. So what should you do? Increase mode of passion in people. Then you can see gorgeous material civilization. And how to increase passion? Increase their desire for sex life. Give an impetus to a person more and more about lusty desire, sex life, and then you can see huge material civilization like Ravana's Lanka. See, that is how it results in. Whereas, if we want to advance in spiritual civilization, then this passion has to be reduced as much as possible, practically nil, and more mode of goodness. So, the more we infuse mode of goodness in people, the result will be Vedic civilization. The more we induce passion in people, the result will be modern civilization, materialistic civilization. So this is what actually we can see. So Prabhupada says here in the purport, therefore if one wants to advance in spiritual life, one has to come to the platform of purified desire. So goodness is from the mind, and the mind is one which produces all desires. So these desires, if we completely purify, then actually we come to the spiritual platform. Now, it is very important to see, we have seen the analysis. Mind is produced from goodness, intelligence from passion, senses from passion. Now, devotional principle involves engaging all of them in the service of the Lord. And that verse Prabhupada explains is a beautiful explanation of devotional service. Savai manaha Krishna padar vindayor. Amrish Maharaj, first of all, he engaged his mind by meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai manaha Krishna padar vindayor. By meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane. And he utilized his tongue in describing Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane, about the different activities of Vaikuntha Ishwar. Prabhupada explains that actually the original name of Tirupati Balaji is Vaikuntha Ishwar. Apabhramsha of that is Venkateshwar. See, he is called Vaikuntha Natha or Venkateshwar because he is Vaikuntha Ishwar. So, Prabhupada analyzes this. Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane. In this material world, it is Kuntha Gunanu Varnane. We are all describing material subject matter which will only cause us anxiety. Kuntha means anxiety. Simple. Any material subject you dwell in, any material subject, it will only give you anxiety. It will be the only cause of anxiety in our life. Whereas the subject matter of the Supreme Lord, the more we describe the subject matter related to the Supreme Lord, the more we are freed from material anxiety. See, this is the difference. So the tongue has to be utilized for describing the glories of the Supreme Lord, which is called Krishna Katha, Vaikuntha Varta. Vaikuntha Varta means description of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, His abode, His different gunas, His different leelas, all those things. That is called Krishna Katha. So Bhagavatam is filled with Krishna Katha. Bhagavad Gita is filled with Krishna Katha. We have to utilize our time in describing Krishna Katha. So that is very important. We should not use our tongue practically even for a moment for mundane Katha. Isn't it? Prabhupada explains how in the Western world people are crazy about mundane Katha. So much so, Prabhupada explains from that incident which happened in Sheffield, one of the countries somewhere near London, where there were mines, workers working in the mines, and one priest went and he was encouraging them to take to glorification of Lord Jesus Christ. So first of all they said, who is he? What is his number? So they are thinking he is also one among us. And then the priest explained, he is not one among you, he is different, he is from the spiritual world. And if you don't surrender unto him, then you will rot in hellish life. So then they asked, what is that hellish life? Please describe. So then he was describing dark, damp, and there was no, practically reaction at all from their side. Because they were already living in that kind of life, hellish life. So the priest was very intelligent. He knew what these people are attached to. He said, my dear sir, hell means no newspaper. And immediately they said, horrible. Really horrible. You see. So, people are attached to this. In Bhagavatam, when Parikshit Maharaj asked two very important questions to Shukadeva Goswami, one question was, what should be the most important principle in life of every living entity, especially human beings? What should be the most important goal of their life? What should they meditate upon? What should they hear about? All this. And then the second question he asked was, specifically of a person who is about to die, what is his goal? What should he think about? After hearing these inquiries, Shukadeva Goswami first of all congratulated Parikshit Maharaj. He said, Variyan apite prashnaha, whatever questions you have asked, they are very good. Why? Lokahitam krite nripaha. Because they are meant for the welfare of whole society, of whole human society. And then next he describes that whereas other people who are absorbed in materialism, they have hundreds and thousands of inquiries, thousands of subject matter to discuss, but not Atma Tattvam. Apart from Atma Tattvam, they have hundreds and thousands of subject matter. They waste their time. In the morning, they waste their time working for Kutumba Bharnenava, in the night, Nidraya, and only for sex life. So, we can see actually this is how material life is. Material life means only Rajoguna mode of passion is prominent. Sex life, yan maithuna adi grahamedi sukham hi tucham. From spiritual platform, that sukham is considered to be tucham, and that is very prominent in material life. So what we have to do in spiritual life, that we have to make zero. So how we have to make zero, that is described. Mind you put on lotus feet of Krishna, with words you describe about the glories of Krishna. Do not waste time on mundane subject matters, isn't it? That will sap our vital energy away. One should understand that. Vital energy, this prana is very essential. Prana you utilize for focusing on subject matter related to Krishna, not on material thing. It will sap our vital energy away. That's why this civilization is called suicidal, because it saps the vital energy required for spiritual advancement. And then Prabhupada says, what else he did? Then he utilized his legs to walk to the temple of the Lord. He was a king, but still he walked to the temple of the Lord. Harer Kshetra, you see. So Prabhupada in one of his lectures says, instead of standing for 3 hours in cinema hall, one should walk to the temple of the Lord. That should be the utilization of our legs. And the hand should be used to cleanse the temple of the Lord. So all the senses, working senses, knowledge acquiring senses, from the ears you hear about the holy name, tongue you taste prasadam, you talk about Krishna, all the senses including prana, everything can be engaged in service of the Lord. Then it becomes devotional service. And that is what Narada Muni also describes. Narada also says, Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam. First you get rid of all upadis, this, that. And then tat paratvena nirmalam, when your senses are thus purified, serve with your senses the master of the senses, and that is called as devotional service, that is called bhakti. Today's conversation is very interesting. It is practically about engaging our senses in the service of master of senses. Very interesting. I'll just read some portion of that. So, the devotee was reading from Prabhupada books about how the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another, just like one is changing the dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. See, we are not knowing how much dangerous these material desires are. We are not knowing. We are cultivating them, more and more material desires. The more we cultivate material desire means our transmigration to varieties of life is fixed. One after another, one after another. The more you produce desire from this mind, rather than purifying those desires, the more our pathway to transmigration in varieties of life is open. See, we are not knowing how serious it is not to cultivate material desires. The moment you cultivate, your future lives are created. People are not doing this. Due to his desire to lord over the material nature, he is put into undesirable circumstances. Under the influence of material desire, the living entity sometime is born as demigod, sometime man, sometime beast, sometime bird, worm, aquatic, bug. This is going on. See. So Prabhupada then says, because we are developing a different consciousness, consciousness is one, but being colored by different circumstances, there we have to accept similar type of body. Consciousness, pure. You color it, that kind of body you have to accept. Blue color, you have to accept a blue color of body. Just an example. Whatever different shades of these passion and ignorance, desires we have, that kind of body, material nature will grant us. It will give us. Therefore, we have to accept similar kind of body. So, if our consciousness is cleansed, we do not undergo the circumstantial changes by different species of life. Simple formula. Consciousness should be cleansed. These material desires is what has polluted our consciousness. Cleanse that, then no more acceptance of material body again. That is required. In human life we can do that. Not to associate with the mode of material nature, but associate with God. And that is why Krishna consciousness movement is given. Associate more and more with subject matter related to Krishna, consciousness will become purified. Then we have to take to Krishna consciousness, because such consciousness will help us to be free from contamination of these different types of material consciousness and save us from transmigrating from one body to another. So we accept this different association on account of our strong propensity for sense gratification. Therefore, we have to purify the senses so that the senses may be engaged in service of the master of senses. Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti rujyate. And then Prabhupada is saying, The master is Krishna. So, if it is engaged in the service of the master, it is normal condition. We are liberated. And this purification you can take very easily by chanting Hare Krishna. Immediately associate with Krishna. Krishna's name is non-different. So as we are associating with fire, it becomes warm. The quality of the fire comes. As it is materially possible, spiritually it is possible in perfect order. Process is the same. You associate with Krishna and you become Krishnite, as pure as Krishna. Krishna is therefore advising Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. So this is the process, you can see. Stop with this Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki